in control. You can choose either you still work 9 to 5. I know some people still work the 9 to 5, maybe 4 days a week. Or for myself, I just need the really, really flexible working out. So some days I don't start until 11 o'clock in the morning, but I work until 11 p.m. at night because I work with a lot of US clients. So it can be very regular as well. So sometimes it's very long days, but sometimes shorter days. And usually you may end up with people calling you up at the last minute, and then you have to just decide whether to take on the work, and you do, it becomes very long hour. This can be nice, but it also can be very difficult to juggle if you have multiple clients as well. And this type of pressure may not be suitable for everyone. In terms of the workload versus time off, so the good thing that I really like is actually the extended time off. So I have taken quite a few holidays where it would be 5-6 weeks holiday in one go. When you're in permanent job, there's no chance of that happening. You may be able to negotiate 3 weeks if you're lucky, and 4 weeks you're very, very lucky. But I've managed to take some really long holiday as well. The downside is you only get paid when you're working. So there's no holiday pay. Remember, you're not working. You're on holiday, enjoy yourself, you get no income whatsoever. There's no sick pay. So if you're ill, I had an operation a few years ago, so I was down for about 2 weeks. So there's no payment there. And even like now, attending a conference, for example, you'll be doing out your own time. You won't be getting paid for that. And the workload time off can be tricky as well, because you may end up with all the timeline coming together, and suddenly you thought, oh, how to juggle and try to get everything done. That becomes quite tricky. And also you have to know when to say no as well, because I think a lot of people go into consultancy, they just thought that whatever that comes to them, so they just got to grab that piece of work and just do it, which is maybe what you have to do at the beginning, but sometimes at some point you have to be able to say no. And it's not a bad thing, because there's one project very, very early on in my career where I just had to tell the client, I say, I really would love to take on the project, but I can't do it because of the timing. They actually quite appreciate that. And afterwards, I did get other work from them because they just felt that the honesty is quite key. Income versus expenses. A lot of people think that consultancy, you charge a lot more money. So, hey, all the money coming in. The downside is don't underestimate the expenses. The software licenses cost money. There's accountant's fees. You have to think about your own pension, insurance, and any cost for training. And also, buying a new laptop and printer, for example. There's a lot of cost in it. And also beware of the tax situation, because obviously you're no longer in PAYE. So you'll be thinking about filling in tax returns and how you set it up. And also, it depends on how many clients you have. Inland revenue really don't like people having just one client. So I always end up with several clients. With one client, then you get into this IR35 tax situation as well. General admin, the good thing I like about consultancy is there's a lot of the office type of admin that you don't have to do. There's a lot of maybe certain trainings like, why am I sitting in this room doing the training? And you don't have any of that. The downside is there are a lot of other admins that you have to do then. Bookkeeping, if you need to travel, you need to book your own travel, how you sort out your IT backup, because everything on your computer, you really need to be backing them up as well to make sure that you don't have a problem with it. So you will need to do all those things as well, which is not ideal sometimes. With consultancy, you get to meet a lot of people, a lot of clients, and a lot of projects, which is absolutely great. I really love that. The only downside is all your clients will expect you to treat them as their number one client. So they will expect you to give them the priority. And also the clients will have different expectations. So you have to be very careful how to manage them. And it can get very lonely working for yourself as well, potentially. The knowledge is very nice, very satisfying to be able to share your knowledge. The downside is the clients expect you to know everything. And one thing you really have to do is make sure you do training yourself, make sure you're always continuously learning. But there's a time and cost involved in it. One thing that I would also say to people is sometimes it's okay to say, I don't know the answer, but don't just say, I don't know and leave it as that. With the client, I would say, you know what, I don't know the answer, but let me have a think about it, or let me find out. That always helps. Clients usually don't mind you need a bit of time to think about it. They will recognize that. But if you just say, I don't know and leave it as that, they don't like it. There's a lot of multitasking going on, especially you have multiple projects. You need to juggle the timelines, and sometimes you end up with conflict of timelines, which can be quite tricky. And sometimes you may have conflict of interest as well. You may come up with a project where the client wants you to work on it, but because you're working on something that is competing with it, so you may need to be able to disclose or walk away with it as well. Other skills, certainly there's a lot of other skills like what Sophie earlier mentioned about bookkeeping and cash flow. You have to learn all these business skills as well, which is great, because they're all transferable skills if you decide to do other things as well. But it can be things that you really don't want to do and you have no interest in it. And finally, I'll leave you some thoughts from me. One of the effective interactions with clients is really learn the language and use concepts they can relate to. Don't start throwing jargons at them that they just sort of say, I don't know what you're talking about. It's always better to adapt to what they're comfortable with as well. Be very honest with them. Make sure you have the integrity. If things you don't believe in it and you think it's wrong, say so and discuss with the client. And be prepared to roll up your sleeve and get the work done. Sometimes you may be working some very high level stuff, but at the same time, you may need to just really get some of the really mundane stuff to get out of the way and just get it done as well, because there may not be anyone else to help you with it. Training, your continual professional development is absolutely key. And although it's time that you don't get paid for it, but it's absolutely essential that you always update your knowledge. Reading journals, going to training courses, conference is good. A lot of times you have to learn on the job as well from the client. Other soft skills like communications, project management, time management, report writing, these are all things you should learn as well. Networking is very important as well. And here, because as I say, I work for myself, so it can get very lonely. So I do have a network of friends who are all consultants, whether it's in statistics or just in the industry or even in other areas, just management consultants. So I know who to call upon if I need to just bounce off some ideas, or if on some days I'm really feeling down, I just sort of ring them up and say, hey, I just need some support, please. And it's always useful to know where to find these help, because a lot of times you don't know everything. Sometimes you just sort of, I could send an email to a few people and say, hey, I've got this issue. Can anyone help? And within 5 minutes, you usually get 1 or 2 emails back and say, hey, can we have a chat on the phone? So that's really, really useful. And finally, if you do think about jumping into consultancy, prepare for it. Don't just say, oh, I'll just hand my notice and then I'll just jump. Do some homework and just prepare, just figure out what to learn and talk to a few people like ourselves who's done it, and then just get ready for it. And that's all I have to say. And I've got all my contact details here. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Albert. And actually, you answered one of the questions on the chat during your talk, and that was about working with single clients and the IR35, which is kind of new. It's been around for a bit. It's basically, if you are just going as a consultant to work for a company solely, it's not cool. But you should ask a tax advisor on that, and it is quite important. That's why these guys have got multiple clients, because if you're just doing consultancy as opposed to being employed, it can be seen as a tax dodge. But we're statisticians, not accountants, so you should get some proper advice on that. Anyway, next up is Rianne Davis.
Cheers, Rob. Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Rianne. I'm a data scientist at a lovely little company called Jumping Rivers. I've been there about 18 months now. And before that, I guess I've done a bit of a mix of different types of consultancy, but I've never been the boss as such. I've always worked for consultancies. So when I finished my stats PhD, I actually took a break from that and did a little bit of work at Unilever, which is a massive company. And you might think, well, what's that got to do with consultancy? But actually, a lot of these big global international companies have a small group in the very center, which is kind of an internal consultancy. So effectively, lots of different departments and different parts of the company will just come to you and ask for your advice. So you've still got that kind of trying to understand the different subject knowledge, getting a feel, having that time pressure, doing time estimates. So you can actually experience consultancy within a very large company. And then after that, I worked for a tiny consultancy, just me and a bloke called Howard. Howard really likes trains. I really like data. So we were trying to basically try and do some data analysis, some data science in the railway industry, because they're perhaps not it's not an industry that's kind of really taken to the kind of sort of data-driven decision type stuff compared to other companies. other industries. And where I'm at now currently is Jumping Rivers. So they're up in Newcastle, but we all work remotely, even before the event. So we work remotely. I'm up in Lancaster. And what we do is we provide training, and we also do consultancy. And really, our expertise is R and Python programming with statistics. So most of our training courses are things like how to do statistical modeling in R, or how to do machine learning in Python, or how to build a web application using something like R Shiny. But quite a lot of our work really comes from the consultancy side. And the consultancy projects are a bit of a mix. So we do quite a lot of data cleaning, data analysis, sort of statistical modeling. But quite often the reason clients come to us is because maybe they've developed something in R already and they don't quite know how to scale it up. They want to have a web application or an interface for their statistical model, particularly sort of pharma companies that we work with often want that sort of thing. So they often want us to build statistical tools that they can use and that non-technical people can use. So often the sorts of things we're delivering to clients can be just a report or a code review. It can be a sort of classic, what I think of as a classical statistical analysis, where it's just, here's some data, go away, do the analysis, write it up and give it back to us. Or just, can you build us a web app? Can you build us an API that will do this statistical modeling for us? So it's quite a broad range of the sorts of things we do. And it's actually, I guess, for a consultancy compared to the other groups here, it's quite large. We've actually got about 6 consultants now working actively on client projects. It's a bit smaller when I started, about 3 consultants. And they've been going about 5 or 6 years now. And we work across a lot of different sectors. So Jumping Rivers might sound like the sort of most mysteriously named data science company in the world. We're not a water company, but we do seem to work with a lot of water companies, which does confuse things when you go to conferences and all your examples are like Northumbrian Water and different utilities companies. But yeah, we work a lot with utilities companies, marketing companies, sort of financial sector. We've done a lot of work with sort of environment stuff as well, and some charities. And if you've been to an RSS conference before, you probably see my face. We quite often have a stall at the conference and I'm normally throwing these sort of coasters at you. So maybe you've spoken to someone from Jumping Rivers before. In terms of sort of thoughts on consultancy, a big thing for me, I mean, people have talked about communication already. A big thing for me is setting the expectations with the client right at the start. So when we sit down and have that first meeting, before we've even necessarily agreed that we're going to have a contract together, there's a sort of a large list of things that I want to go through to make sure that the relationship is kind of, everyone understands how we're going to work. Even simple things like, you know, when does the work need to be done? When does your money need to be spent? Who actually decides when we finished? Right? Because I might think the product's finished, but the client might actually be looking for something different. So there's kind of a huge range of questions that I tend to go through with the client on that first meeting. And that list is kind of ever evolving as I make more mistakes and then realize I really should have asked that in the first meeting. And then that goes on my sort of checklist. And the big one for me, especially with, I think Albert's already kind of mentioned the downsides in terms of, you know, sometimes working hours, that sort of drive, and there's a lot of highly motivated people in consultancy and it's sometimes hard to leave that project alone. So one of the big things I found is actually being really clear with my clients early on about how we're going to communicate. So I've come across people that tend to say, right, you can join our Slack channel, here's my mobile number, we're here for you whenever. And that sounds lovely, but actually I find that clients tend to respond to just knowing, okay, we're going to meet on a Tuesday morning. I'm going to go through exactly where we're at with the project. You can give me as many questions as you like. And if you've got any worries between our weekly meetings, you know, you can drop us an email and we'll respond within 48 hours. And actually for the client, knowing that they're going to get a response within a particular time can be sometimes more reassuring than having your mobile number and ringing you up in the middle of the night. So I found setting expectations with the client in terms of how that relationship is going to work is one of the big things I've learned, I think, in the last 18 months, especially that kind of when is it done. I've certainly had projects where I kind of thought everything was wrapped up and then the client didn't think everything was wrapped up. And then it leads to people, you know, not being happy when, you know, there's actually nothing wrong. It's just a misunderstanding. So yeah, set expectations from the start. Other things in terms of the tools that we do, the tools that we use, I always like to try and choose the simplest tool that will do the job. So, I did a PhD in statistics. I love listening to all the fancy methods explained at the sort of cutting edge phase at the RSS conference. But my clients don't necessarily need that. Sometimes my client just needs a simple JLM, and that's fine. And they're coming to me because I understand the assumptions being made around the data. They're not coming to me because they need necessarily the most cutting edge bit of machine learning. Sometimes a graph is actually enough for a client to actually really understand their data. And I guess the big thing I'm always thinking when I'm trying to choose a tool, and also when I'm trying to communicate with a client, is actually work out who is the client's audience. Because quite often when you're working with a client, it's not because they want something building, it's because they want to build something to then give to someone else, right? So you're sort of, the client's almost the middleman. So it's no point getting a tool and a solution that works for your client if your client's audience isn't actually going to find that useful. So that's, I guess, about choosing the simplest tool. And then the final thing I kind of wanted to pick up on was, again, Albert's kind of talked about this. I'm a bit of the CPD geek. I love keeping track of like skills. I was one of those people that, when they're doing the swimming as a kid, you had like all the different badges on. And I think you can get a little bit overwhelmed in consultancy because you think, oh my goodness, I've got to be great at communicating and all the stats and all of the programming. And I think the most important thing is not to try and skill up on everything, but to reflect on your own skills and reflect on what your client really needs. And for me, it's programming is, the clients come to us because we're excellent at making shiny apps and tools that really work well, scaled up high and deployed. So although it's important for me to keep my stats up to date and, keeping in touch with significance and dropping in at the conferences, for me, I need to know what's the next big thing in terms of the R packages and how that's evolving kind of, at the time. So I kind of know what low level stuff I need to keep ticking along. And I also need to know which skills I need to keep at the top of my game. So that's me, Rhiannon from Jumping Rivers.
Great, thanks, Rhiannon. That's really, really interesting. And just a double upsell, if you CPD, if you do things like get chartered, you have to do CPD. So I was involved in a lovely talk the other day on that. So you can go check that out at your own leisure. So we've got one more speaker, and I noticed the numbers going up on this participants all the time. So we're at 78. Anybody who's joined and didn't hear me talking last time, if you have questions to any of the speakers or all the speakers, just put them in the chat and we're going to do a panel session right at the end. But last and by no means least, I'm going to hand over to Marie Oldfield. Marie.
I'm Marie Oldfield. I run Oldfield Consultancy, and we've just set up a new business, Kuinua Coaching as well. So I'm a chartered statistician and a chartered scientist. And these are my two businesses. So the background to this, so I was working at DSTL before, and I did all the CPD. I was working anywhere from chemical, biological, animal experiments to medical, to buying new ships, to doing statistics, everything. Anything was going on, I was doing it. And the reason that I left DSTL, we got a new manager and she didn't understand statistics. And I was just like, what am I going to do with this? So I left. And it was really weird because that week I picked up the phone and it was a foreign number, and Airbus rang me and asked me if I wanted to work for NATO. So I had 2 weeks to get a company set up and go out there and start consulting. So it was amazing. And it just never stopped since then, because I've always wanted to work for myself. I've never enjoyed being told what to do or how to do it, because I always think that I know better. And so, start your own company then. So the journey's been interesting. I'll show you a few of my clients. So this is literally nearly all word of mouth. These are all my clients. So for 4 hours looking at how to get people to stay on a gambling program. Well, it wasn't a gambling program. It was a cooking program where you had to gamble on it. And then there's Huddersfield, where we were doing some data analysis for the students. Benchmark training. So this is where my new business come from. We started doing a lot of training with high-level government officials and oil and gas. So I enjoyed that more, and I thought, well, actually, I'm going to open that as well because I enjoy doing that. So we've worked with a huge range of people. Some of the projects that we've done here have been crazy. It's been like nuts. When you fly out of Manchester or Glasgow, you're flying on my route. So I put those routes in to try and make aircraft more efficient. So when you're stepping up like this, that's what we told them to do. The Home Office, we looked at Brexit borders. So how can you staff all the borders? What infrastructure do you need? I'm not even an infrastructure person. And the very last project I was doing this year was procuring and implementing multi-billion-pound infrastructure for the Royal Navy. So this is how crazy consultancy is. You can start in one place and end up somewhere completely different. I saw someone mention in the chat as well, Six Sigma. I did that for Rolls-Royce. That's a completely different area again. Really statistical, really interesting. So there's so many opportunities. I've done program management recently. I was just down at Defence Digital buying a new huge global network for the MOD. I think the last bit of statistical work I did was last year. Since then, I've not actually even used it. So it just shows you how your skills develop. So at the minute, what I kind of do is translate between people. So that's a skill that you learn while you're doing statistics. You've got the client that maybe might not know a lot about statistics and the statistician or technical people that are doing the work, and you have to try and join that up somehow. And it's the same skill across every industry. So when you're trying to, analyze aircraft routes, but then British Airways is asking you, what are you doing? You've got to be able to talk. So I end up being this intermediary that kind of translates between people. And that just seems to be really transferable across industries. And that's how I've ended up, starting in analysis and recently being in program management. And CPD as well, picking up things like how to write business cases and how to purchase something, or, you can just end up in any different field at this point. So those are the type of projects that I've done, everything from analysis to programs. The risky bits. So I wanted to put some bad bits in, because always we hear how good consultancy is. There are some downsides. Accountancy, you really need to know what you're doing. My accountant nearly sent me bankrupt because she just didn't handle my accounts right. So you need to get this straight, because you're going to earn more money than you've probably ever earned before. And you need to know that you need to pay tax on that, and you need to know how much tax. So make sure you get that squared away, because that is one of the biggest problems that I've had in consultancy. And my accountant now is amazing, but that's definitely somebody that you want to spend the money on, because they will, make or break your business really. The tax point of it, get a spreadsheet. I've got one, work out the tax. So important, because you are going to get a massive bill at the end of the year for this, and you can't get out of it. And I think you have like 30 days to pay it for one of them. So you need to know how much you need to save. Insurance. I'm insured for millions of pounds because of the work that I do. Even if you're not asked for insurance, I would recommend getting insurance, because you need the professional indemnity in case you do something wrong. You need the public liability. You need all kinds of insurances, because the reality is if you do something wrong and that really impacts profit, people, whatever, you can get sued. It is a possibility. So you need to be insured so that that's all taken care of. Kingsbridge Insurance is recommended by the RSS, and I've used them for many years and they've been really good. So that's a good place to go. IR35. If you go and sit on a seat at one office and you work prescribed hours and it looks like you're a worker, then you're a worker, and then you're going to get in a lot of trouble. So just make really sure that you're not IR35. A lot of the roles now that come out, if you're working through agencies, are IR35. It's getting very, very hard to find real consulting work. So agencies, a lot of consultants start out and they start going through agencies. So this can be good for a stopgap, but it's a nightmare, because you are working for a client via someone else. So you've got to balance the agency and what they're telling you with the client. I've had numerous issues where there's been a contractual problem there, and then I've been drawn into it because I'm actually working with the client as a consultant, but it's not my contract, so I can't discuss it because it's between them and the agency. I would not recommend this way of working. The reason agencies are putting you in 9 times out of 10 is because there's a problem and it needs fixing. And generally you can't fix it because it's something that's wrong within the company. I would not recommend doing this at all. I'd recommend going out and finding your own work, working directly with a client. I know a lot of people that work through agencies, and generally the kind of IT people do all right because they kind of, you know, sit away from everyone else. But when you're actually interacting on a daily basis with the client, this can get very sticky, and it can also put you inside IR35 as well without you even knowing it. So you really got to be clear on that side of things. Relationships. So when you go in via agencies, this is where relationships can break down. And if they're putting you in there to fill a gap, you can end up in a really toxic place. And I saw somebody mentioning ethics. If you're in a contract or you're consulting and you think something is wrong, then I would get out of it, because if you put your name to it and they send the work off and something goes wrong, this insurance is going to start coming into play. So you need to be a little bit careful with it. I had a company try and put my name on a report and send it out. I'd never even written this report, and they said they wanted to do it for credibility. I was consulting direct to this company. We had a bit of a discussion, and that was me finished with them, because I'm not about to have my name put on things that, one, I didn't even write, and two, I didn't agree with. So you've got to be extremely careful. And that comes back to what Rianne was saying as well about you've got to communicate with them. You've got to upfront say, what is it you need doing? How are we going to communicate? This is the landscape that we're going to work in. Because if you don't do that, then you can end up being treated like an employee or a worker again. And then the lines get blurred and it all gets a little bit weird. So there are some things that they're not necessarily downsides or really bad things if you handle them right and you know how to handle them right. And I've learned some of this through experience, and it's not been particularly pleasant. So just make sure that get some business knowledge, know how to run your business, know what the things are that impact you, and speak to everybody that's done it before you so that you can hear from them what their failures are and what you can do differently to avoid all of this, because it's not a good place to be. So what are the best bits? There's a lot of best bits. People, you meet some amazing people. I've made new friends. I've met so many people, so interesting, all over the world. I've been working in Europe. I've been working in the UK. I spent 5 years doing pro bono management for a company in America. So I've met so many people, and they've just been absolutely fantastic. And some of these people are lifelong friends. Networking. For your business to survive, you're going to have to network. Nearly 100% of my business comes out of networking. And it's just really speaking to people, finding out what they need, if you can fill that gap. Just really talking to people, because you never know where that next job's going to come from, or that next consultancy piece. Events are really good for this as well. When you're in person at conferences or you go to meetups or things like that, you can meet a lot of people. I don't work, probably should have said this at the beginning, but I don't really work the same as what most people do work in consultancies. I've got a consortium of about 40 people. So I've got a legal agreement that I give out to people, and when I need them on a project, I bring that specialist in. So I'm not employing them because I don't need them all year. I need them for whatever specific project that is. So if I need a coder, I bring them in. If I need a defense specialist, I bring them in. So that seems to work really well, because everybody's doing different projects. We're all consultants, and we can kind of line up the projects together and work together on what we need to. You can have some amazing success. So, getting multi-billion pounds worth of infrastructure put in, and, helping train senior officials. It's fantastic when you get a really good success. And, I was part of 13 reports going into the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology earlier this year. It's fantastic just to feel that you're doing something useful and giving back as well at the same time in some of the stuff that you're doing, because it's not always about the data. A lot of the work I do impacts on people on the front line. So family members that are out there in the army, in the navy, these are the people that I work for, basically. I might be doing statistical analysis, but these are the people that are impacted, and that's who I'm always thinking about. Paycheck, going to earn a lot of money if you do well at consultancy. So be sensible. There isn't any sick pay, as we were saying. There isn't any, maternity pay, that kind of thing, like you would get at a normal job. So just be sensible with your money. Don't do what I did, blow it all, and then think, oh dear, I'm 6 months into consultancy, I should probably save something. Maybe that £500 stake wasn't exactly the right idea. So be careful with that money. Being able to give back, this is what I enjoy. So because I work really hard on my business, I also have time to do other things like STEM, ambassador. I'm on the professional affairs committee for the RSS, finance and economics committee. I do review panel for pro bono for the RSS. I do all kinds of things to help and give back. And I really like to do things around mental health and education, because I think that's a really important area right now, and especially for children. So I do like to give back wherever I can. Advice. So where to find work? I would not recommend agencies if you can get away with it. Find your own work, because then it's your own thing, your own company. You're setting this up for independence. Be independent. Go and find your own stuff, and then you get more satisfaction out of it when it's your own thing. And you can do, you can brand yourself. You can make your own logo. You can do all this stuff. Just make it your own. Find your niche as well. Sometimes that's a good thing to do, to find out where it is that you actually, can provide most value. Networking, you find a lot of work there. Adaptability and flexibility comes into travel. So it might be that you're sat at home on a Friday and then they say you need to be in the office for the next 3 weeks. You've got no travel booked, no hotel booked. You're rushing down there. You're missing your family. You've got appointments you need to change. I have literally been stood in an airport and not know where I am. I was stood at a check-in desk in Glasgow and they said, where are you going? And I said, Glasgow. And they were like, we can't go there from here. And I was like, I thought I was in London. I was traveling that much at one point all over the country. I didn't even know where I was. I was booking flights to Heathrow. I was meant to be in Gatwick. Wrong day, wrong time. So you really need, when you get that busy, some sort of assistant, because it can get crazy. When you're up and down, especially all over the world, it can get very interesting. So there you start to need to know, what are my options for travel? Can I book an earlier flight? How do I get home? What am I going to eat? I would not recommend sitting in steak restaurants every night. I do, but there are healthier ways to live. You can go to the gym while you're in a contract, find out what the local area is and try and, keep your routines going and enjoy it. Travel's amazing. When you're doing a lot of travel, it requires a lot of organisation. And you need to be flexible around the client as well. And I've had that in the last few weeks. Can you be down south at a minute's notice? And it's like, there's hardly any flights. So yeah, be aware of that. I wanted to bring this up because the Operational Research Society has just started a group for independent consultants. So it's just another networking thing. If you want to get involved in that, then please feel free. dantilly275@gmail.com. He's the one running that. And it's quite good. There's some good stuff about IR35 going on in there right now. So thank you. If there's any questions, please feel free to drop me an email if you want any more information, and I shall get back to you.
Great. I had a question. How good was that £500 steak?
Oh my goodness. It was on the top of a restaurant in Bangkok, and it was the best steak I've ever had in my entire life. And the scenery was fantastic. I would not take it back.
Excellent. I should be at that price. Great. So thank you. It's great talk. Great talks from everybody. And we have lots of questions. I did at the start say I'd prepared some. We're not going to need any, I don't think, because all your questions are really, really good. So I'm going to start right at the top. It's first in, first out. The first question was, it relates back to your talk, Sophie, but this is pretty much for all of you. And I suppose it's different because obviously, Holly, Rianne, you work for a consultancy. The rest of you own, run, or work for yourselves. You said be ruthless with your time. How do you work out what to spend time on? And I think, Sophie, do you want to take that one first?
Oh, you learned the really hard way is the answer. I think the thing about being ruthless with your time is I have learned the hard way by working until 2 o'clock in the morning when I'm doing my tax return, my VAT return, PAYE and all the other bits, is that I now sit down every morning and I literally write out to the minute what my day is going to look like. The calls I've got, the work I've got, how long am I allocating to that work? And that actually comes back to some of the things Marie and the others were saying about, you do actually need to make a profit out of this. So if you think that a project is going to take you 10 days and it takes you 30, there's all sorts to do on that. So you have to start getting very good at estimates, and statisticians are pretty good with numbers usually. So I would say do that, just start estimating. You'll get better at it as you're going on, have your spreadsheet. But at the end of every day, whenever that end is, and sometimes it's late at night, I work out what I've got to do the next day. And then I have a power hour in the morning where I sit there and I literally organise my day. And Holly will tell you that I'll sit there going, oh, Melissa, I know we're meant to be talking and I'm 10 minutes late, but just ruthlessly organise your time, because it is the only thing you can't get back.
Excellent. Albert, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think, in terms of tracking the time is key as well. Sometimes when you start off, you just don't know. You may think, oh, this task may take only 10 days to do, but it turns out to be 20, 30 days. But you'll get better as you go along. And I must say that even like now, after 20 years, sometimes I still kind of underestimate things. So you have to build in a bit of extra time as well, because things do go wrong. And sometimes, the client may change their mind, or so say, oh, can you just relook at this a little bit longer? So I think, plan it, but also track what you've done, because that will be key for what you do in future as well.
I use an app for that.
I use Clockify. What do you use, Sophie?
Oh, I use Toggle.
Toggle, yeah.
And Marie, like in terms of that, how do you estimate like how long stuff's going to take? Because obviously, if time is the commodity, how do you estimate kind of how long a piece of work will take, and how accurate is that generally?
So you can tell the client that you want 5 days to do it, and they'll tell you to do it in 2, because they don't want to pay you for 5. So you need to just be realistic and know what you can produce in 2 as to what you can produce in 5. And if it's the case that you can add more value, it's always worth saying to the client, having that conversation and seeing what they say about that. They might go for the 5. But it is some of them, the contracts come to you and they want you to do 40 days, and you could be finished in 20, but they still pay you for 40. So I think it just depends on the client, really.
No, it's a good answer. And Holly, obviously, you work for a consultancy. How is the kind of timing aspect on your side? Because I suppose you're being told you need to do it in X amount of time by your boss. And how do you kind of deal with that? And how does it work in terms of your kind of timings?
Yeah, I just have to make a list in the morning of what I need to do in the day. But there is also, if there's something I'm spending a lot of time on that I'm thinking I'm spending way too much time on this, surely there's an easier way, or I haven't come across that, and then I'll just go back to Sophie and be like, have I just missed something here? And then I'll have a look at another project or something in the meantime while I'm just waiting to get back to me.
Oh, cool. And Rianne, anything to add from your side?
I guess this comes back to, again, choosing, if you can choose a simple tool that rather than a complex tool, that's easier to estimate, right? I know how long it takes to do a linear regression. If I'm playing around with more fancy techniques, I might be having more fun, but it's harder to estimate. And when I'm doing those time estimates and scopes, I always ask the client if I can see the data, because that gives me a better estimate and it gets NDA signed quickly. And also I always, if it's looking to be more than a couple of days, I chunk it into milestones, because estimating at that milestone level, I find a lot easier than trying to time estimate the whole contract.
No, that's great. Next question, and that was from Hannah, that question. Great question, Hannah. Fede, this one is specifically to you, Sophie. Did you start Phase alone, or was there a team from the beginning? I think I know the answer. And if the former, when were you able to start hiring other people?
So it was just me.
Yep.
And it was me for quite a while. And then I got to the point where I had got really bad at estimating, because I just got too much work. Just too much work came in. And I sat down one day, about 3 and a bit years ago. And my husband just went, "You've got to hire." And I went, "Don't be stupid. I am not a company." And he went, "Well, you are now." And he gave me a bit of a kick and said, "You either need to get going or get out." So I took an incredibly deep breath and hired Abby. And then after Abby was Sam. And I'll tell you what, the first time I hired somebody, I don't think I slept for a month. I have never felt so monumentally sick every single morning, because suddenly it sounds so simple, but there is somebody now who relies on you for income. And I cannot tell you how utterly terrifying that is, because as an employee, quite rightly, they get paid the same amount every month at the same time, with a pension and all of the things that come with that. So I just had to take the biggest leap of faith I've ever done in my life. And bless her, Abby's still with me. She kind of came along for the ride, and I said if she was prepared to be my first employee, we'd make it work, and we have done. But it's terrifying, and you just it's like with everything, there's no right time, you just do it.
No, it's a great answer. Fully agree. The next question is from Zoe Turner, and this is probably more, I assume when you hire people, Sophie, you basically pay them what you pay them. And this is kind of for you guys who are setting your value. And I suppose if you're alone, so Albert, Marie, Sophie, how do you know your own value, whether you are negotiating for work or setting on a salary? How do you set your value? It's a good question, because how much should something cost? Marie, you want to take this one to start off with?
This is really hard. So when you go in for tendering or government frameworks, you have to set rate cards. So you have to set what people are going to pay you. Now, if you know what kind of rate the agencies are paying, they're probably taking an extra 25% on top of that, at least maybe 50. So that's the rate you want to be charging. So I've always found that kind of overinflating my prices has been the best way, because it's very hard to benchmark it, and it's hard to figure out. It's not really what you're worth and what your value is. You're working in a whole different space where the money's not reasonable anymore, because you're just talking about figures that are quite high. So I just do a lot of research and try and figure out what everybody else is doing and what contracts are coming out at. And if the contracts are, I was bidding for some contracts earlier this year. If the contract's at 220,000 and you want to put a reasonable bid in, you need to take a bit off that, and then you need to split it up between the different aspects that you need to do. If you're just bidding for ongoing work on frameworks, then it's kind of per day, and you need to figure out really what would pay for the travel and the food, and what would be a reasonable value for you to go in at. And the difference between a new entry to an experienced consultant is a big jump. So it's worth kind of trying to compare yourself against other people and just networking, and not really going and asking what their rate is, but just kind of trying to figure it out from research.
Albert, in your industry, which obviously different, how does it work there?
Yeah, again, it's very, very tricky to do it. I think what someone actually told me before a few years ago is that their way of benchmarking it is almost like whatever your annual salary, take 1% and use that as your daily rate. I don't know how true that is, but it seems to work for a lot of people as well that I've talked to. But yeah, again, it's almost like it's a matter of trial and error. Sometimes you when you start off, you're almost bound to get it wrong, either too high or too low, and then you adjust it along the way.
Sophie, anything to add on your side?
No, it's just honestly, it starts like being trial and error. I think it really, really does. And we have different charges depending on what we're doing, and that's the honest thing. I think the one thing it is worth thinking about long and hard, and it comes back, I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Ram, when you walk away, or was it Albert? I think it might have been Albert actually. There will come a time when you work out how long it's going to take you, and you work out what you think you can charge, and you realise that it's actually not economically viable to do the work. And that is an incredibly hard place to find yourself. Say no to work is really hard, because there's this innate feast and famine that just gut-wrenchingly sits inside. I can see everybody nodding, going, you think you're never going to work again. So having the courage to walk away when it's just not economically viable, and have in your mind what is the absolute minimum you need per day to cover, as Marie was saying, all your costs.
Marie?
I would actually say as well, make sure you've got 6 months' wages saved. Because what Sophie was saying there about you might have work and you might not have work for 6 months or a year. So make sure you've got enough to live on.
Yep, it's all sound advice. The next question from Joseph Lowe, I think it's been covered, but I'm going to say it anyway. What is the landscape of statistical consultancy like? Do people tend to juggle multiple projects? Well, I think from most of the speakers, yes. And things like IR35, which has been really well raised by the speakers, is something you need to be aware of. Okay, this is another one from Hannah. Really good question, and this is for the guys who probably have their own pretty much for everybody. What were the biggest failures, and what did you learn from them? Marie, you want to go ahead? Was it the steak?
Money. The steak is not a failure; it was a success. It was the money that was a failure. Get a good accountant. Get some insurance, and get a tax advisor. You can't go much wrong after that, and then just make sure that you. If things are going wrong, just get out and do something else. There's always contracts out there, and network. But I think, yeah, my biggest failures are tied to working through agencies and not knowing enough about how to run my own business in terms of cash flow. Like Sophie was saying, you need that, not saving any money, not knowing about tax. Really research what it is you need to know for your business.
Albert, Sophie, you got anything to add on that?
So I would say that one of the comments I got given when I started up was that profit is vanity and cash flow is sanity. And cash flow, I know we keep going around this, but businesses fail more than anything else because of cash flow.
And what were your biggest failures so far, would you say?
So I don't know if it was a failure, but I think my biggest learning, as Mu was saying, is trying to work out your cash flow and to do exactly what Mu was saying, to make sure that you are actually a viable company and that you've got everything stable. It takes a long time to actually build up a level of stability where you start to breathe, I think. And it's a long, hard slog to get to that point. And actually focusing on the end game while making sure you've got the stuff coming in and you're starting to build up that, there is no pot at the start. There is no pot. There is no fallback at the start. And actually, really simple business tricks of the other one I was given right at the start was whatever you get for your day rate, split it into 3 pots. One of those pots is tax. One of those pots is unlever eat again. And one of those pots, if there is enough, you can start to take some money out to live off.
Yeah, and I think the tax situation is pretty key. And, people, if they are thinking about it, should look into it, because anything, and rates can be high, but you pay 20% on any profit before you even look at getting it out of business. And that could go up even more now. And then you've got to pay your own tax. Tax is horrible. And I think there is, for a lot of people, if you're looking to make the jump, there's probably an equation out there which says whether it's worthwhile to do it, because there are a lot of well-paid jobs. Not to put you off it, but that tax situation is key. Albert, your kind of biggest failure?
Well, I wouldn't say it's failure, but it's really when you first started, you may be thinking, oh, this is my ideal sweet spot. That's how I want to do things. But when you start going into it, you suddenly realize that, oh, maybe actually there's not a market there. So you don't hesitate to have to adapt. And then at some point you will find exactly where it's what your unique selling point is. I think that's the key part to find a lot more work. Because if you can't distinguish from other people, then it's like, where's the differentiation? So you need to be able to build up your USP in that sense. And I think what I wanted to start doing at the beginning is quite different from what I'm doing now. It's not a bad thing, but you're just like, when I first started, I didn't know any better. So I had my ideal situations. I did what I wanted to do, but now things change slightly, but I know where my sweet spot is.
That's a great answer. Next question's from Ian Dwyer, and I'm actually going to slightly reword this so we can hear from Holly and Rianne. And the question is, before you launched, did you undertake market research to help focus on the best opportunities for your consultancy? But to Holly, why did you get into consultancy? Did you do the research on why you wanted to go into consultancy? Because I'm sure you had a lot of options going straight into the workplace.
Well, in the uni, I did a lot of projects that were very similar to consultancy, but I just didn't really know that's what it was. I was just like, I wonder what job it is that I could do things like this with, but I really didn't know about it. There wasn't that much about it, and the more I started looking into it, it was more the big firms that I was seeing online that was offering data science roles and things like that. So they were the ones I was really applying for. And then Sophie connected with me on LinkedIn because we had a mutual connection, and that's really how I learned about Bays, and it was exactly the kind of work I was looking for, really. So yeah, it was just out of really good luck that I found Bays.
So is that the best thing that happened?
Yeah, it is exactly. Yeah.
Rianne, for you, because obviously you've been working in it, I mean, how much did you think about it? You talked a little bit about why you wanted to get into it, but did you do a lot of research, or was it just you fell into it and enjoyed it?
I actually fell into a different job first. I worked for a more standard company. Yeah, it was psychology and computer programming and gaming, all sorts of weird stuff. But I love the variety in consultancy, and I love helping people. And I also really wanted the flexibility. So I wanted to be based not in a big city, up in the north, and work from home and be able to go for bike rides at lunchtime. And consultancy gives me that flexibility.
Yep. Next question from Fede to everybody is, how do you go about approaching potential customers, and how much will word of mouth bring you And when should you consider starting investing serious money in marketing? And we've kind of touched on this, and I think probably the better question is how much, and do you market beyond word of mouth? Because you've each talked about, you know, various aspects of it, and your network will get you so far, but is there a pinch point when you're like, we need to grow? And I think company growth is a kind of really interesting point. You know, you each, you know, you're either independent in some ways, obviously some of you are working with other people, others you have some employees, or you're working in, you know, smallish companies. When's the point of kind of pushing it, or is this a lifestyle company? And I suppose it's another good question is, you know, where are your kind of thoughts on where your own companies are going to go and how it's going to grow? Or is this a lifestyle and you're happy with it and you just let the company grow organically? Sophie?
So it's an interesting question, and it's the one my husband told me to either get going or get out. And it's not often, and Marie and Albert can probably talk about it, it's not often you get to leave something. And I'm really, really proud of the fact that Bayes is a living wage employer. And we have other values in place. So we have the childcare vouchers, and we have, even before COVID, we were all remote, and we have fully flexible working. I don't mind what hours you work, just get the job done. Yeah. And we've tried to create a really inclusive sort of working environment, even before this year. We've sort of grown organically, and actually the way I grow is that I find the need in the market and where those projects are coming from and what skills do we need, and that's when we get people in to do those skills, and we keep growing in that way. Is it a lifestyle? I guess, as everybody's alluded to, yeah, the fact that I don't live in a big city and I don't have to commute into a big city anymore is really great. But I set out of the necessity of, actually, you go back quite a few years, 16 years ago now, and actually it was really quite hard to find flexible part-time working jobs. Still is, actually. So I think making opportunities to grow naturally, but in meeting a need, is the way forwards. And being nice, a nice company. I hope we're a nice company. I think we are. We're friendly.
And Marie, from your point of view, what's your kind of, are you going to go down the marketing route? You say everything's word of mouth, networking, which you're really good at, like from personal experience, knowing you. Is there a point when you kind of think, I need to start spending money on this and, you know, pushing it? And this kind of thing of startups, and it's a kind of interesting point of, a kind of historical startup point of view is you just spend all the money and push yourself and spend everything you get invested into you and just go for broke. In kind of consultancy, it's different because, like you say, you're paying yourself. Is there a part of you that thinks, should I be investing money? Am I leaving money on the table?
So it depends. I think as a consultant, you know in your gut when it's time to scale. And when you scale, that's when you need to start marketing. That doesn't need to cost you anything. You can go on Upwork and you can get somebody to do your marketing list for £20, and then you can just email shot everybody. For my coaching business, that's completely different. So I've been using Facebook and Instagram and social media. What I've been doing there is not spending a lot, but doing like little page boosts, and that's been getting more people involved. So it depends what you're doing, but I don't think that there's a massive need for huge budgets for marketing. I mean, if you pay for a website, that costs enough. You pay for your branding. If you use what you've got and your branding well enough and you can network well enough, you shouldn't really need to do a huge amount of marketing, because there's only a limited number of like work contracts you can do at one time. And I've never really found it necessary, but my business is scaling, but it's not needing to be marketed really to be scaled.
No, good. Albert, anything on your side to add?
I suppose mine is purely lifestyle in the sense that, you know, I have no real desire to grow. Yeah, I've tried it before, only as very temporary, as someone to help me out for a few weeks. And I know that straight away is not for me. So I just quite happy on my own. But I have a network of people that, you know, if there's extra work that or I need to bring in extra resources, I can use other people from that point as well. All of my work at the moment seems to be word of mouth. But in the early days, in terms of, I suppose, marketing in a very loose sense, is I speak at conferences, I go to meetings and talk. Those are my marketing tools in the early days, in the early 2000s. These days, not really. Occasionally, I may write a blog post somewhere and just like share my thoughts, and that's a way that for me to market myself, to show what I know, really.
No, that's great. And I think that kind of thing of this, you know, consultancy can be a lifestyle change and can be different. and you can work around when you want to work and still make the money that you want to make, and have that satisfaction. I think it's a great thing, and some of the people who are looking to get into it should consider. Next question, I'm going to slightly reword again, more so for Rianne initially, then for Holly. When you're dealing with clients, obviously being young statisticians, how do you deal with kind of senior clients? Obviously, you might be dealing with people who are kind of more experienced relative to you in their fields. How is that from a kind of young statistician's point of view?
I don't know. I'm not feeling so young anymore, Rob. I'm starting to get kicked out of the YSS. Yeah, so I have had that thing, especially in training. Actually, someone signs up for to learn how to do statistics, and then I sort of stand in front of them, young woman, and they go, "Hang on, I sort of expected a shirt here." Especially in the railway industry, that was an eye opener. I'm quite a confident person, so that doesn't tend to fluster me. But when you start actually communicating and listening to people and sharing your skills, they tend to quickly realize that actually you do know what you're talking about, and when they understand that actually you do actually have the expertise that they need, I find that tends to go away. But it can be a bit intimidating, and that's why things like Our Ladies, the Women in Machine Learning sectors are there to kind of give places for people to build that confidence and practice speaking before speaking in front of maybe audiences that aren't expecting you to stand up at the front.
Holly, same kind of thing for you. What's your thoughts on that? You there, Holly? You're muted.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me now?
I can hear
you. Yeah, no, I haven't really had any bad experiences or anything with clients older. They've always been listened to me and understood that what I was saying was something that I was like the expert in, so that they would listen to what I had to say and understood that's where my skills would lie. So yeah, I haven't had any bad experiences with anything like that.
No, that's cool. Question from Carlos that I think we've already answered, but I'll just go through it just so you know. I'd like to ask about your commercial process. How do you sell? Do you work mostly directly with companies or other consultancies, agencies? How do you reach new companies' clients? I think we've covered that quite well. If not, Carlos, just drop me a message in here and we can go back to it. There was a few questions in the chat which were answered by people in the chat, which is always good. Marie, I was going to ask you specifically about professional standards when it comes to consultancy in the consultants directory, because you're on PAC, you know a lot about this. Maybe you could give us a quick summary just for those who aren't aware.
Yeah, I forgot to mention this. So on the consultancy directory that we've got on the website, generally companies will go down that list and ring you and try and find somebody to do the work. When you get to be a C-Stat, I think it is, you have to sign up to a professional code of conduct. I think most people work that way anyway because it's common sense. There are things like the ethics policy, and you can email in if you need some help with it. I think there's probably more that we could do in regards to professional standards, but it is quite difficult as well when you're in a project and it's maybe ethically not right. I would say that if you've got any kind of issues, maybe try and get a mentor or find somebody more experienced, talk to them about it. And if you really can't, square it off in your own mind, I would not continue with the contract, because it's not worth having these issues within a contract if the company that you're with is not willing to work that way. But yeah, I think there's some stuff on the website, Rob. I didn't find a link.
Yep,
I'll paste a link in for the code of conduct.
You are a starian. Cool. A question for each of you, and if we keep this down to a kind of percentage split would be nice. How much of your work is doing analysis or producing a report for use, and how much is on advice, ED, design, or stats analysis? Go on, Marie, you're there. What do you think the split is?
All of it. Do it all equally. It depends what the project is. So
50-50, you reckon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Generally, you do the analysis, you produce a report. It's all kind of the same work for me.
But then is how much on the giving advice? Obviously, there's the doing and then the giving advice. Yours is 50-50, yeah?
It depends on the project. So it might be that you've got like 6 months of analysis you need to do, and then you give the advice in one PowerPoint presentation, and then you write a report. But then it might be that the entire project is giving advice, which is one of the ones that I just did, and there's no analysis in it, but there is a report at the end of it. So it can be very varied, but all of those tasks are always in there.
Albert, for you, what's the kind of split?
Yeah, I think my split would be more on the giving advice on the design side of things. The analysis tends to be probably, I would say, maybe overall probably work out about 15 to 20%. It's not a huge amount because in the pharmaceutical industry, usually this type of work, the analysis has to be done by contract research organizations, CROs.
Yeah.
So I don't do that, but occasionally there may be ad hoc analysis that I'll do on that side.
Holly, for you, what was your kind of split?
At the moment, I've mainly been working on the analysis side with just a few meetings here and there but I can imagine that will be a more equal split as the projects go on. But because I've only just recently started at the moment, it's been a lot of analysis.
The reports are coming.
For you,
Don't worry, the reports are coming.
What's your split, Sophie?
I'm like Marie, it really does vary. We have projects that are mainly analytical based and others that are sometimes more policy or advice driven. But I would say that I easily spend a day a week on business admin. So there's always a day a week where I'm sitting doing the stuff that just needs to make a business run. And then it varies. And
Rianne, you're in a different kind of space. How's your split?
So predominantly more product-based and analysis. The sort of advice we give tends to be, we do code review, and also it can just be someone saying, we've got this idea, here's our database, this is how we're thinking of connecting everything up, this is where our model's going to live, is that sensible? So we actually kind of review their data pipeline as well. So yeah, more product stuff, maybe 70-30.
Nice. We've got 4 minutes and I kind of want to do all the questions, but there are 15 messages I haven't read. So some people are going to be disappointed. I'm really sorry. Any resources you can recommend to look at, such as books, websites? I think we've had a few. If we've got any more, people can paste them into. Do you want to? Well, you can mention it if you want, Ria.
I read about a year ago the human side of consultancy. I'll paste it in the chat. It's more academic. It's focused on the statistical side. It's about 20 years old, so it asks about find a good typist. But otherwise, I think the human side, the communication side, is quite relevant.
I'd go for Eric Rees' Lead Startup. It's always a good one.
Cool. There was a question on balancing time and quality of work, which I think we've touched on already, hopefully. What effect have the events this year had on your work? Great question. To all of you, how has this very quietly publicised pandemic affected the consultants here? Marie?
Not at all, to be perfectly honest. And I thought that I was going to have no work left, but apparently it's all coming out of the woodwork now. I'm not entirely sure why. I think really when you've got your hands in many networks and many markets, some of them tend to be publicising at the same time, some of them are really quiet. So again, it's networking. If you keep networking, there'll generally always be something.
Sophie?
Again, so I thought that we'd never work again. And that turns out not to be true. I think we were actually quite a bit like Jumping Rivers. We don't have an office. We didn't have an office. So whereas go back to December, I was in a conference and people going, oh, that's sweet, you're so small, you don't have an office. Actually flip forward to March and going, oh, so all your processes for shared working is already in place? Already, it's all there. Actually, what was a downside earlier last year because you were cute and small, actually we were all there and set up.
Albert, for you?
Yeah, no, I thought there would be less work, but it hasn't been the case. If anything, it's gone up as well. One of the things that from my side that is quite important because I work in healthcare, so there's all these new regulations, all the changes, how clinical trials are run with COVID. That's I have to actually learn a lot more straight off, and every day seems to be some new regulations or some new guidelines coming out.
And for you two guys, I know because obviously you're still working, I assume you've been working, Holly and Rianne, it's all been fine during this?
Yeah, we had a bit of a scrabble in March. Everyone suddenly wanted online training, and luckily we already had VM set up, so we were ready to go. But yeah, if anything, workload's gone up. I am nervous though, is there going to be as much money floating around in companies and bids? I think we've had a lot of work now. I think we'll be seeing the effects in a year or two when maybe companies don't have as much cash for consultancy. So that's, I think, we're being more careful in terms of what we do now, because you've got to think about the future as well.
And Holly, you've been kept busy?
Yeah, well, I started the job in the pandemic, so I hadn't had anything to compare it to, really.
No, that's great. It's great that everything's going well for all of you, and it's 19 minutes past, and actually we've pretty much gone through every question on there. So I want to thank you all for kind of being part of this. Thank the YSS for setting this up. I think it's been really interesting. Hopefully everyone on here thinks it's been really good as well. I just want to say, you know, if people are looking to get into consultancy, a lot of the speakers have put their details towards the bottom of the chat. If anyone else wants to, then people can get in touch. It's something you need to think about. Obviously, there is a big jump, but as these people have shown, can be really rewarding, really interesting, and a really interesting kind of career change. So you know these people now, you know them by face. So if you ever see them at the conference or anywhere else, please approach them because they're all really nice people. And I'm sure if you've got any other questions, you'll be able to contact them on the details given there. Thank you for coming. And guys, thank you for talking. I've had a great time and it's been really, really interesting. Thank you.